All right, so this lesson, guys, is fairly common sense stuff. Okay, what kind of things does a plant require in order to survive? What are some of the things in its environment that it's got to deal with that could affect its growth? Okay, things like that. Again, pretty common sense stuff, but it's important for us to be able to know it and understand it, and then obviously think critically about it. If we were asked on an exam, here's a situation a plant is in, what kind of things might it do to deal with that? And you could talk about, well, you know, plants need this or that, and it might employ this tropism. Okay, the tropisms we talked about last week, like geotropism and thigmotropism. Okay, and it would have to secrete the following hormones in order to make that happen because it needs to get this resource. It's something it requires in order to grow and live. Right? So that's the kind of stuff we're going over today. If I write stuff down on here, guys, make sure that you're writing it down. Okay, because it's adding to your notes if there's something that's not in there. All right, so we need to learn the components that affect plant growth and then understand how those components affect the growth of a plant. Now, if we were listing things a plant needs to in order to live, what things would be on that list? Sunlight. Obviously, that's a big one. Okay, what else? Grayson? Water. Another big one. Okay. Carbon dioxide. All right, those are our big three for sure, because those are the raw materials for photosynthesis. We have to have those. Are there other things that are also important? Soil. What's in the soil that it's got to get? Nutrients, right? Okay, so we got soil, okay, and the nutrients within. Okay, when we're talking specifically about those nutrients, what nutrients are we looking for? Like, okay, minerals might be one. What kind of things are in fertilizer? Okay, decomposing stuff, we call that stuff humus. Okay, and that is a source of some of the things that are in fertilizer. What's the biggest ingredient in fertilizer? Right, nitrates. Okay, nitrogen essentially. Okay, nitrogen is the big one, usually in the form of nitrates is preferable. Okay, but plants will also use this stuff. Okay, ammonium. All right, so we got ammonium, nitrates. Okay, those are their preferred sources of nitrogen. What else is in the soil that they like? The other two ingredients that are in fertilizer. There's potassium, right? Okay, and the other one also starts with P. Phosphorus. All right, so those are the things that plants require. Okay, essentially those are the big ones. Okay, it needs potassium for mineral balance, needs phosphorus because that's an ingredient in making nucleic acids, okay, DNA and things like that. Okay, nitrates, those are needed for making protein. Right, and make no mistake, plants need protein. Okay, especially the legumes. Okay, beans and peas and nuts. Okay, all have high amounts of protein in them. Okay, and that is derived from nitrates. All right, so those are kind of our big ingredients. Now, how the plant adapts to its environment and make sure that it can get these things, that's what we're going to kind of look at today. All right, so some of the things a plant needs, okay, or that can affect its growth are what we call abiotic components. If something is abiotic, it is not living. All right, so these would be the non-living parts of the environment. So, obviously, sunlight, okay, is an abiotic component. It's not a living thing. All right, water, not a living thing. All right, but obviously necessary for the growth of a plant. Okay, the soil, we talked about that. That's important. Okay, and the minerals that we talked about that are in the soil, obviously all abiotic components. Okay, everybody with me so far? What's the one I missed? What's in the air? Oxygen, but more importantly, right? That stuff. Plants can make their own oxygen, okay, but they got to have carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is the source of carbon for them to make this stuff. If there's no carbon dioxide, there's no carbon to make glucose. There's no carbon to make sugar in photosynthesis. Okay, so what we're looking at when photosynthesis occurs is a reaction that essentially looks like this. Okay, that's photosynthesis. That is the chemical reaction for photosynthesis. Okay, carbon dioxide and water, okay, in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, okay, can make glucose and oxygen. All right, everybody with me there? So do plants have to take in a lot of carbon dioxide and water to make a single glucose molecule? Yeah, they do, right? And there's only one carbon atom in every molecule of carbon dioxide. There are 6 in every molecule of glucose it has to make. So there's a lot of water and a lot of carbon dioxide needed, okay, in order for that process to occur. It is not a combustion reaction because it does not produce carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is produced in a combustion reaction. However, okay, since you're asking, when the plants burn the glucose, you get this reaction. That's a combustion reaction. And it just happens to be the mirror image of photosynthesis. Agreed? I mean, have I essentially just flipped those two reactions? Okay, so this is what goes on Earth, guys. This is what we call the carbon cycle. Okay, the carbon cycle is what happens to carbon and oxygen, okay, in the Earth's atmosphere as a result of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Okay, this is what we do all the time. Okay, you're doing it right now. You're burning glucose, you're putting carbon dioxide and water vapor into the air. Okay, plants are taking that carbon dioxide and water that you so kindly gave them, okay, and turning it back into this stuff, which is what we need. Okay, there's that nice balance. What we produce is what they need, what they produce is what we need. Okay, that's the carbon cycle. That's what keeps things going. Okay, everybody follow me on that one? Yes? Okay. Okay. Now, abiotic components, things that are factors that affect the growth of a plant. Okay? One big factor is temperature. Right? Why is temperature a big factor? Why is it listed before water and before sunlight? Because if it's below freezing, what resource does the plant not get? Water. Okay? Plants are incapable of transporting solid water, okay, through their xylem, okay, up to their leaves. So obviously temperature affects whether a plant carries out photosynthesis at all. It can be sunny, right? When we see in the wintertime it's 35 below and it's bright and sunny outside. It's one of those cruel days, okay, where you think, oh, it looks nice outside. You open the door and you're just about freeze to death right then. Okay. Sunlight's not the only factor. Okay, it can be sunny and there can be no photosynthesis going on. Okay, it's sunny on the surface of Mars, but it's also very cold and very dry. You don't see any plants growing, okay, anywhere there. Same thing in Antarctica. Okay, you don't see any plants growing even though there's sunshine. Okay, but there's no liquid water. It's all solid. Right, so temperature is a big deal here. Okay, important factor because of its effect on biological processes. Okay, and most importantly, especially plants have no ability to regulate their body temperature. Okay? In fact, very few organisms on Earth have the ability to regulate their body temperature. Mammals are the exception. Okay? We as mammals have some limited ability to maintain body temperature. Okay? For us, we can effectively maintain our body temperature between about 10 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius. Okay? After that, we cease to be able to regulate our body temperature effectively. All right? Now you're probably looking at me and going, 10 degrees, Coder? Like, really? We don't die when it's below 10 degrees. Yeah, you don't because you put on a coat or you go inside. Okay? You know what temperature more deaths occur from more deaths from hypothermia occur at? Between -10 and +5. Okay, that's where more people die from hypothermia than any other temperature. Because when it gets below -10, most people have the good sense not to go outside. Okay, or they put on a lot of clothes to go outside. But when it's, 5 degrees outside, we're like, oh, it's bright and sunny, especially right now, right? I mean, it's more than that outside right now. But how many of you came to school this morning and you went, yeah, I don't need a coat? Okay, you walked outside. By the time you probably got to school, you were probably a little chilly. Okay, it wasn't that warm. Now, if you got stuck outside at night, or you were walking home or something like that at night, and something happened, you could easily, if you got lost, you'd easily die of hypothermia because your body doesn't really maintain body temperature that well outside of a certain range. Now, are there animals that can maintain their body temperature lower than that? Sure. Okay, Arctic fox, polar bear, things like that, they maintain their body temperatures at far lower temperatures than that. Okay, are there animals that maintain their body temperature higher temperatures than us? Yes. Okay, every animal is kind of adapted to its environment, but most organisms on Earth do not have the ability to what we call thermoregulate. Okay, if you can thermoregulate, you can regulate your body temperature. Right? Plants obviously don't do that. Okay, whatever temperature it is outside, that's the temperature of the plant. All right, water. Water is essential to life, but its availability varies from place to place. Okay, in Canada, in most places in Canada, we're relatively fortunate in that we have ample supply of water. All right, but Canada is relatively dry compared to, let's say, Brazil or Colombia. Okay, where water is not the limiting factor. Okay, in most environments, water is the limiting factor to plant growth. What do I mean when I say limiting factor? Okay, a limiting factor means this is the thing that determines how much growth happens. Okay, sunlight is not usually a limiting factor on Earth. Okay, usually sunlight is not a problem. Right? But the availability of water is. Carbon dioxide is never a limiting factor. There's always lots of it. Okay? But water is the limiting factor for most plants. All right. Sunlight. Obviously, sunlight's important. Okay? It provides the energy that drives all ecosystems. Okay? It is the source of energy for all ecosystems on Earth. Okay? And only plants, obviously, and algae and things like that, can actually use its energy directly. So the sun indirectly supplies us, right? But that's only because we eat the organisms that produced it via photosynthesis, or we ate the organisms that ate the plants. Okay, one or the other. Now, here's the other thing. Light isn't just an energy source. Light is also a factor determining when plants germinate, when they flower, when they reproduce, okay, and when they go dormant. All right, we talked about this the other day. Light is the most reliable factor to indicate that winter is coming. Okay, temperature is not. We know temperature can fluctuate pretty wildly, especially in the fall and in the spring. The most reliable thing that tells a plant it's time to grow or it's time to go dormant is how long the day is. Okay, how much light are they getting? All right, so light influences the behavior of many plants. It also influences the behavior of animals. Okay, most animals' mating cycles are based on length of day. Okay, most animals, okay, will mate as the days are almost at their shortest. That way, they're having their young when the days are longer, the temperatures are warmer, and the most food will be available for them. Okay? It makes no sense for an animal to mate as the days get shorter, okay, and then have its offspring in the dead of winter when there's nothing for them to eat. All right, now, again, that's going to depend on how long the animal gestates for. All right? If you're an elephant, you're pregnant for like 2 years. Okay, whereas if you're a field mouse, you're pregnant for like 3 weeks or something like that. Okay, so it all depends on how long you're actually going to carry the young before they're born. Same way we do. It's not light as long, right? And plants, they can tell based on how much photosynthesis they're able to carry out. As they're carrying out less and less because there's less sunlight coming in, they know days are getting shorter, winter's coming. Okay, true. Yep. But they have to grow very, very fast. Okay. Now, they do have an advantage. When it is sunny for them, it is sunny a lot. All right, because in June, if you're above the Arctic Circle, you get 24 hours of sun. Okay, so let's say starting now, they're probably looking at getting around 14 hours of sun, probably around this time of the year, 14 hours of sun. Okay, by June it'll be 24 hours. The problem is by November it'll be none. Okay, or close to none. So yes, they have a short growing season, but during that growing season they can grow 24 hours a day. Right. All right, so obviously light's a big deal there because it makes sure that organisms are having their young at the right times. Okay, wind. Wind is a huge factor for the growth of plants. Okay, because it amplifies not only the effect of temperature, but it also increases the rate of evaporation. Okay, if you want something to dry more quickly, let's say your hair, you don't just sit in one place and wait for your hair to dry. What do? You pull out your hair dryer. Okay, pull out your hair dryer and you run a bunch of hot air past your hair. That makes your hair dry faster. Why? Because the air is always moving. Okay, you're always bringing in more dry air to go past your hair. If you just sit in one place, the humidity around your head is always going to be about the same. You're not getting this movement of air that will help to dry your hair. Everyone follow me there? Okay, wind makes things evaporate more quickly. Okay, so wind's an important thing there, but wind is also important because of wind chill. Okay, we all know what that's like. Okay, in the wintertime, they always say, well, it's it's -10, but it feels like it's -35 outside because it's blowing 30 clicks an hour. Okay, why is that? Well, same deal. If you've got air around your hand, okay, you're losing energy to the air. And if that air moves away, you lose more energy to the now colder air that's near your hand. That's why we bundle up. Okay, you put on gloves, you put on a coat. That traps air next to your body. Okay, that trapped air can't move away, so you feel warmer for longer. Okay, if you're running around without a coat, cold air is always moving past you, and you're losing a lot more energy to the surroundings than you would otherwise. Okay, Grayson, can I just turn off that front bank of lights there for a sec? Okay, now wind can also influence the shape of a plant. Okay, these here are Engelmann spruce. Okay, they're a type of pine or spruce tree that grows in the mountains in Kananaskis and Banff. Okay, the ones that are right near the tree line, that's where you stop seeing trees and you basically just have rocks and grass. Okay, the ones that grow there don't have a lot of protection from the wind because there's not other trees around. So in the wintertime, when the wind is blowing, it's also carrying ice crystals along with it. Okay, and those ice crystals can be very hard. It can be just like being in a sandstorm in the desert. All right, if you were in the sandstorm in the desert, it's really dangerous because it's essentially like standing in front of a sandblaster. It can peel the skin right off your bones. Okay, now in the winter with snow, you've all felt that when you get those snow pellets hitting you, it hurts your face. Okay, they're cold, they're hard, they're sharp. Okay, it hurts. Well, it hurts the plants too. And it will actually cause them to grow in this shape. So here's what that tree actually looks like. Viewed from the side, it bends like this and only grows branches on the inside. Okay? Why would that be a smart thing to do for that plant? Yeah, exactly. If we look down on that plant from the top, here's the trunk of the tree. Okay? All the branches grow in this sector right here. So the trunk creates a wind barrier or a windbreak for the branches. Now, if you can't grow branches on all sides, do you carry out as much photosynthesis? No. That's why these Engelmann spruce are called crummels. Okay? They're called crummels because they don't grow as tall as they should. They grow stunted, bent over, and they only grow branches in that one sector. Okay? It allows them to live, but it doesn't allow them to get big and tall like an Engelmann spruce can, okay, if it's in more ideal conditions. Okay? Everybody with me there? Now, if you're growing in this form, also look around the ground level. They tend to grow a lot of branches near ground level because in the wintertime, those branches will be covered with what? They'll be covered in snow and they'll be protected. In the summertime, these branches are protecting the soil around the plant from the sun and from the wind. What does that help keep in the soil? Water. Exactly. Okay, it's creating like almost a seal against the ground where the sun can't hit the ground, the wind can't get in there and evaporate the water out of the soil, so it gets more of a supply of water that way. Okay, because it doesn't have the shade of other trees around to shade its roots, so it grows more close to the ground and shades its own roots that way. All right, so all of these are sort of adaptations of a plant, adapting to factors that could affect it in its environment. Okay, rocks and soil. Rocks and soil are important. Okay, the type of soil determines what plants will grow in a certain area. Okay, around here we have very thick soil. Okay, the prairies tend to have deep topsoil and then fairly deep underneath that still. Okay, and then rocks are quite a ways down. Right now, here, what do you see right at the surface? Rocks. Okay, this soil is so thin that when I stuck the trowel in the ground, that's as far as I could stick it in the ground. In fact, I had to put one of these rocks behind it. You can't see it, but there's a rock behind it holding it up so it wouldn't fall down. I couldn't jam that trowel into the soil far enough for it to stand up on its own. Okay, so is this an old soil or a young soil? Young. Okay, here's why it's young. Soil builds up from erosion of rocks. Okay, so when rocks erode, little pieces of them come off. Okay, little chunks of sand and stuff like that. That's what builds up soil. It's a very slow process. So the thinner a soil is, the younger it is. Okay, around here we've had all the sediment from the glaciers, from the melting of the glaciers, washed down in here and deposited where we are. So we have thick soil. But further up in the mountains, okay, it doesn't sit there. As the ice melts, it washes that stuff away, which is why on the top of the mountains you don't have a lot of soil. Okay, it's covered by rocks, or it's covered by ice. Okay, there's not a lot of plant growth there to hold it down, so most of it washes down the rivers and streams and deposits down here. Okay, so this is a very young soil, and you can see, do you see any big plants growing in it? Right? No trees. Where would they put their roots? Right? A tree needs lots and lots of water, and this soil, because it's only this thick, can't hold on to very much water. Right? So nothing that's really water demanding could live in this soil. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, and that's how soil determines what kind of plants live in an area, and then also determines what kind of animals will live there. Now, it's not just how much soil, it's also the nature of the soil. Is it acidic? Is it basic? Okay, those kind of things can also determine what's going to live there. Is it high in salt? Okay, if you've ever seen like where a slough dries up, there's that white stuff on the surface. That's salt. It's minerals. Okay, it's very difficult for things to grow there because it's too salty. Okay, and they can't get the difference in salt between their leaves and their roots to help transport water. All right. Periodic disturbances. Okay, some places are more prone to natural disasters of various kinds than others. All right, and as a result, plants have to be able to adapt to that. Okay, what happened in this picture? Forest fire. Yeah, all the trees are blackened, right? There's no leaves on any of them anymore, right? Obviously, a forest fire is pretty devastating. The community that was there before the fire is now done, okay? And by community, I mean the organisms that were there. The trees, the grass, all of that kind of stuff. It's all dead, right? But does that create new opportunities for other organisms? Yeah, because what a natural disaster does is it changes the availability of the resources. Okay, so most spruce and pine trees, they have special cones. Okay, and those cones usually are covered in a resin. So when they fall off the tree, they just sit on the ground. They don't release the seeds until the resin is gone. And usually the thing that gets rid of that resin is high temperature. So a fire comes along and melts that resin and cracks open the pine cone. Now those seeds are on the ground. Now those seeds can germinate. Okay, it's a good time for them to do that, because if they'd have germinated before, they wouldn't have been able to get any light, because all of these trees would have been full of needles and leaves. They'd have blocked the sun, and that thing wouldn't have got any energy to survive. Now that its parents are gone, okay, the sun can get through a little bit better. There's still some shade, which is good if you're a young sapling, but it can get some sunlight. And these trees aren't stealing all the water either. They're dead. Their roots are still there, but their roots aren't doing anything anymore. So now that young sapling tree has access to resources it wouldn't have had access to before. All right? So a natural disaster is important in terms of cycling nutrients and cycling resources. All right? A flood, same thing. All right? What did we see? What ends up on the ground after a flood? Yeah, all kinds of bad stuff, right? All that silt. You guys saw all the silt that was deposited in the flood last summer, right? Okay? It's like sand. It's everywhere. It's stinky. Okay? Why is it stinky? Well, partly because that stuff had sewage in it. But, okay, also because it's full of nutrients. Okay? The silt and stuff that's deposited after a flood is very rich and quite fertile. So, after a flood, you get new plants and stuff growing through this very fertile flood soil. Okay, so again, it redistributes the resources in different places and makes them more available.
So if I river like all their like excess sewage
It'll depend on what else was in the sewage. Unfortunately, in the sewage that we have, there's also lots of chemicals. Okay, if we were talking strictly, you know, the natural sediment and feces and urine, it would have been fine because it'd just be nitrogen. Okay, and yes, in that case, it would be. Okay, but if there's other chemicals in there, then no. But usually, it's okay. Yep. All right. Now, what about a tornado? Does that redistribute resources? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't deposit new stuff, but it takes care of big things. Okay, knocks down trees, allows things that are smaller to grow and replace them. Again, it changes the availability of light. Okay, things like that. Now, volcanic eruptions. That's an odd one because there's different kinds of volcanic eruptions. Okay, if I have a volcanic eruption like what happens in Hawaii, yeah, that's not necessarily going to be redistributing resources. It's going to be encasing whatever was there in solid rock. That you're starting over. Okay, when a volcanic eruption like that happens, you're starting over again. Okay, doesn't mean stuff won't grow there. It's just going to take a long time. But if you have a volcanic eruption like, let's say, Mount St. Helens, okay, Mount St. Helens volcanic eruption was mostly ash. There wasn't any like liquid rock flowing down the side of the mountain. So that ash is full of nitrogen, sulfur, okay, and stuff like that that are important nutrients for a plant to grow. Right? So volcanic soil is actually usually quite fertile. Okay, and so plants can grow in it fairly well. Okay, and you'll often see that in like tropical areas where they'll grow things like coffee. Okay, quite fertile soils. All right, now that's all the abiotic stuff. That's all the non-living things. Now the living things. Can living things affect your environment? Absolutely. Okay, if you're a plant, you got to watch out for herbivores. Okay, you get hunted. Now, granted, herbivores don't have to be great hunters. It's not like you have to stalk a blade of grass before you eat it. Okay, but it's still your prey. Okay, if you're a plant, you want to try and do things that keep you from being eaten. Right? Cacti have a great solution to that. They're covered in thorns. Nobody will bother them. Okay, some plants secrete chemicals into their tissue, their leaves or their fruit, okay, that make the fruit poisonous. All right, like we all know, I mean, there's certain berries you just don't eat because they'll make you really sick. They probably won't kill you, but they'll make you sick. All right, the idea behind that is if an animal eats something that makes it sick, the sight, smell, and taste of that thing will be repulsive to them for a very long time. Okay, you guys have probably all had that experience, right? Like if you got like the stomach flu and you got it right after you ate something, the next time you eat that thing, you're just not really as big on it. Okay, like the last time for me, it was like I had spaghetti. Okay? I had spaghetti and then I got the stomach flu, and I can't even look at spaghetti now. Okay, like I mean, it's just when I ate the next time I ate spaghetti, I was just like, oh, the last time I ate this, I got sick. Okay, so I get the same feeling if I smell Arby's. Okay, because Arby's, I got food poisoning twice. I've eaten at Arby's twice, and both times I've gotten food poisoning from Arby's. So yeah, so anytime I even smell Arby's, I just feel like I'm going to throw up. Okay, it's a natural reaction. It's called taste aversion. All right. The other thing is, like for birds, if it's a fruit or a bug that they eat that makes them sick, the sight of that bug will make they won't ever go after it again. Okay, it's just called taste aversion. They just won't go anywhere near it. Well, with humans, we would teach each other, right? Like if somebody eats that berry and they get sick, they're gonna go, hey, don't eat those berries. That's kind of the evolutionary thing. But for humans, evolution doesn't really apply to us in the same way it does. Okay, natural selection, I should say, doesn't apply to us in the same way because we're smart. That's not really accurate, but it's kind of true. Okay, so we got all these interactions in here. We got all these living organisms. Some of them, the most important ones even, the ones we don't even notice, are the decomposers. The ones that take all of these nutrients, okay, all of this humus, that dead stuff, and they decompose it. They eat it, okay? They eat the dead stuff and they poop it out, and that stuff is full of nutrients, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, all of that kind of stuff. If we didn't have these organisms around, we wouldn't get any of those nutrients back. Now in Canada, in general, that process is pretty slow, because it gets interrupted. When does it get interrupted? Winter. Okay? Winter interrupts the decomposition process. In the tropical rainforest, if a tree falls in the forest in the tropical rainforest, it's gone in a couple of weeks. Things are growing on it in days. Okay? And it's decomposed in no time. There's way more bugs, there's way more bacteria, there's way more moisture, and it's warmer. Okay? Up here, less bugs, colder temperatures, less water. Decomposition takes a long time. If something dies in the desert, right? The only thing that gets rid of it is when the buzzards come and pick away at the carcass. Okay, it's not like it decomposes much because it's just dry. What's that? Well, the evaporation will take the water, but the carcass will stay there, right? It's not going to take the meat off. It's just going to dry it out. And actually, in the desert, things will mummify in the desert just because they'll dry out. Okay, without the water, they can't decompose. All right, so again, these are all our decomposers, and they're important for cycling all those nutrients. They're probably the most important biotic factor in terms of for plants. Okay, the second most important biotic factor for plants are the things that eat them. Okay, and their adaptations to those. Okay, uptake of water by plants. Okay, showing you here, this is a cross section, okay, of the stem of a plant. All right, so on the outside here, you got the epidermis. Okay, you can see that here. What's the job of the epidermis? Anybody remember? Drew? Right, it secretes the waxy cuticle. Okay, the stuff that prevents evaporation from the outside. Okay, underneath that, you got the cortex. The cortex is essentially just protective cells and tissue. Okay, and then you've got the vascular cylinder. Okay, in the vascular cylinder, okay, you've essentially got phloem and then xylem. Okay, on the interior of that. Okay. All right, and we kind of talked about that already. Now, water can get into a plant in two ways. You don't have these notes, I don't think. I think I took them out, but just as a quick thing here. Okay, water can get in through two routes through the roots. What's called the apoplastic route, which means it goes in between all of the cells, and that way is really fast. Okay, water can get into a plant really quickly because it doesn't actually pass through any cell membranes. Cell membranes slow the passage of water because cell membranes are semi-permeable and they filter and whatever else. Okay, so water can get in really quickly that way. Problem is it's not filtered, it could have bad stuff in it. Okay, the other way is the symplastic route, and that means it actually goes through a whole bunch of cell membranes, it gets filtered, it gets cleaned, okay, and stuff like that before it gets into the xylem. All right, and we don't need to talk about that one or that one. Okay, in terms of water, some plants are what we call hydrophytes. Okay, a hydrophyte loves water. Okay, they're what hydrophytes or hydrophilic. Okay, hydrophilic. The suffix philic or phile means loving. Okay, if you're a hydrophile or hydrophilic or a hydrophyte, you love water. Okay, everyone follow me there? Are you thinking of other words that end in phile here that would kind of follow that same? You are. Okay, yeah, that's where the word pedophile comes from. Okay, they love children, not in the right way. Okay, but phile, that suffix means loving. Okay, Everybody with me there? Yes? Okay. Now, so some examples here, okay? Water lilies, okay? Lilies are hydrophiles. They love water. They grow right out of streams or right out of lakes and ponds and stuff like that. They can tolerate flooded conditions. Not all plants can do that. Okay, if you got like poplar trees or something like that, their roots are covered in water for more than a couple of days, they'll die because their roots will suffocate. They don't get any oxygen. Right? These plants here are also hydrophiles or hydrophytes. These are trees that grow in the tropical rainforest, and they actually have two sets of roots. These roots are basically just an anchor. They hold the tree into the ground. These plants, or these roots here, are actually ones that allow oxygen to get to the plant when it's flooded. Because oftentimes, the tropical rainforest plants are underwater. Okay? And so, they have to have a way of supplying their roots with oxygen. So, they actually call these roots snorkel roots. Okay? Because they allow, again, the roots to breathe. Give you some idea of just how high off the ground those are. Because I took that picture, I couldn't get up there and stand in it. But if I'd have stood up there, okay, at 6 feet tall, that's about where I would have been. Okay, so those roots are quite a ways off the ground, because in the tropical rainforest, oftentimes the floodwaters, okay, which can be there for 6 months at a time, are 5 or 6 feet deep. Okay, so these plants have to be able. Water is not a limiting factor. There's lots of it. Okay, but they don't want to suffocate their roots either, and this allows them to do that. So these are hydrophilic or hydrophyte adaptations. There are, but again, they have sort of different. Like the lily doesn't have really snorkel roots, but it can sort of get the oxygen from the top surface down to the lower. Okay, and then you got xerophytes. Xerophytes love it dry. Okay, xero means dry, okay, or arid. Okay, phytes means loving. So these are all of our dry plants. Now, obviously, cacti are an example. They got a very, very thick, waxy cuticle that protects them from evaporation. Okay, their stomates are much different structure-wise than normal stomates are. They got 4 guard cells, okay, making them close a lot tighter. Okay, and also, xerophytes can also be what we call succulents, okay? And that means that they have very thick leaves, okay? Very thick leaves means, again, a thick waxy cuticle, but also a thick layer of tissue around, like the spongy layer, to protect the spongy layer from evaporation, all right? So you tend to see these kind of looking plants. They're much waxier, okay, than other types of plants are. All right. Okay, other xerophyte adaptations, okay, spread out roots, okay, fibrous root system that's close to the surface, okay, thorns to protect them from being eaten, okay, things like that. All right, that's all I need to know about that one. Okay, now, you do still have about 20 minutes, so I would suggest getting to work on that lab report. Okay, you got some time to talk to your group members. Okay, get talking about comparing your results with other groups. Also, I know a few people missed the cell anatomy lab day and don't have pictures of the cells. So now might be a good time to talk to somebody and see if they would be kind enough to send you the pictures of their cells, okay, in case you need them. Okay, but you got 20 minutes. Let's use it. Okay, otherwise I'll move on to the next thing.